Isaiah, what are we missing about this team? We talk about a lot. Sometimes I think we talk a lot and we don't say much. At least me. But what are we missing when we look at this basketball team? They are 14-6, not 6-14. They are in the upper echelon of the ACC. Why are we so down on them?
I think the way the 14-6 looks, I mean, the losses are against tournament quality teams. Hubert came in saying they had high expectations for the team, and they haven't played to those expectations where you think they're going to be a tournament team, fare well in the tournament. Like, this is a team that looks like right now, if they make it in, a first round exit's very likely.
Miss
I
Clark?
I think it's that simple.
No, I don't know if it is or not. And I'm going to circle back to Greg. And Greg, I'm coming to you with some heat that you got earlier in the season. But Miss Clark, what do you think? What are we missing besides that?
Man, Isaiah hit the nail on the head, but um, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I think it's they played the games that they're losing are against teams that they could face again later on, and that they're going to face even higher quality teams, and they just won't put up a good fight. Um, but I think it is important to note. I know last night someone asked Hubert, someone mentioned something about winning, excuse me, ugly. Um, I think it's important to note that we still see good things even when they're playing bad, when they're not playing good on offense. We see still good defense. Hubert likes to say energy, effort, toughness, still showing signs of that. So I don't think it's over, and I don't think it's I think they still have a chance, but yeah, I just don't think we need to count them out yet. But yeah.
Greg, I'm going to come to you, and there's a couple more questions off the YouTube chat, but Isaiah hit it, and he talked about expectations and what expectations were set at the beginning of this season. And I think you talked about it. We all talked about it, the messaging early in the season. I think that is why we're here talking about a 14-6 team that's in the top 5 in the ACC or whatever, and we're acting like they've had a terrible season. Granted, the competition that they've won against is lesser than the competition that they've lost against, but isn't it always the case for the most part? Your take on the expectations, the reality, and the perception things that are going on with this team.
Yeah, well, Miss Clark nailed it right there, as did Isaiah. But the challenge with being North Carolina and being a blue blood and being what this program has been for the last 70 years, basically, is that the bar is so high. And if you're not playing great basketball, people are going to pick and pluck and really kind of tear you apart just because the expectations are so high. Clemson, that doesn't happen, but North Carolina doesn't want to be Clemson. And so at times you kind of hate it for the players because, they're trying their best. But if they're not as talented as Jamison and Carter and Ed Cota, that's not their fault. Will Johnson, he used to get so much heat, and that kid busted his butt 20 years ago. But because he wasn't an elite NBA guy, people criticized him. And always hated that. That's always stuck with me because he played as hard as he could. So that's kind of the challenge. Now, in terms of expectation setting, as we've discussed, Hubert said after the Asheville game, after they looked so bad up in Connecticut, he was convinced that this team had a chance to win a national championship. I don't think anybody at this point in time still believes that. I mean, is there a fluky chance? Sure. And that's kind of where I said I think some of the messaging is part of it, that there is going to be a learning curve, and it's not going to be a smooth ride, even though some people thought it might be. It's not fair to Hubert to think that. But I think everybody's kind of understanding this is a challenge. I mean, Theo Pinson went on Go Hills podcast and said, everybody relax. So we've got Theo on board now. So I think everybody's kind of understanding that this is going to be a process. And, even Hubert, I think he's toned his comments down kind of understanding what this team needs to do. Now, North Carolina's 14-6, pretty good record. They are, I guess, a game out of first place in the ACC. However, as you said earlier, Tommy, Miami is basically a bubble team right now. And so I went back and looked. Somebody asked, what happened last year? Was there anybody that had no success against Q1 teams and still got in? Yes. Syracuse was 1-7 against Q1 teams last year. North Carolina is 0-6 right now. But Syracuse was 6-1 against Q2 teams. They got in as a number 11 seed. Carolina was a number 8 seed last year. They were 3-9 against Q1 teams, but they were 8-0 against Q2. And this is where it gets important. Carolina played 28 games before Selection Sunday last year. 20 of those 28 games were against Q1 or Q2 opponents.
Jeez.
Right? So it's the whole idea of the the rising tide lifts all boats. That's typically what happens with the ACC. And you're seeing that like in the SEC and the Big Ten this year. Michigan gradually is moving up the rankings, right? Even though the record's still not very good because they keep playing very good teams. Carolina right now is 0-6 against Q1s. They are 2-0 against Q2 teams. Carolina's going to play 31 games in the regular season. And as of right now, more than half of them, 16, are Q3 or Q4, which means those games do not matter whatsoever in terms of NCAA tournament resume.
Unless
you win. If you lose them, they do.
That's right. Absolutely. In terms of winning, they don't help you. And that's crazy for a North Carolina team, for more than half of your games not to matter. And they've only got 7 Q1 or Q2 games remaining. And so that's why these games are so important. Yeah, BC is a Q4 win at home. If you lose that game, it is detrimental to your chances. NC State's going to be a Q3 game. They cannot afford to lose that. They need to win it. They cannot afford to lose it. And so you're talking about games like at Virginia Tech, at Clemson, having massive implications. And the only game really at home remaining that matters is Duke in a couple weeks. And that's just kind of because of the ACC struggling the way it has and because of North Carolina not taking advantage of some of those non-conference opportunities. They're really kind of in this hole. And it's not like they can just coast. I mean, they need to win a majority of those games. They are 2-6 right now against Q1 and Q2 opponents. That's not good. And so it's a challenge, but that kind of explains why, even though the record looks good, even though the ACC standings looks good, they really haven't beat many good teams. And they need to change that over the last, 5 weeks of the regular season?
So what? There are only Q1 games left, or both Duke games at Virginia Tech.
And
is that
Clemson, not Clemson. I think Clemson and Virginia Tech are both right around 65, 70?
Yeah.
Well, the 75 is the threshold.
So 70, is it different on the road versus at home?
Yes,
it is.
significantly.
So top 30 is a Q1 at home. Top 75 is a Q1 on the road. And the reason why is the way that the net works right now, it's made up of 2 components. One is just your net efficiency, which is like how good your opponents is, kind of like the old RPI. The other part is how good are you against quality competition away from home? That's the focus. And what have we talked about all year? Carolina looks great at home, not so good on the road. And so that's one of the components, one of the factors that's working against Carolina right now.
Someone asked about FSU. They're in like the 70 range, and so it's a home game. So that's a Q2 home game.